but also adults. The number of times I've worked with a client who I have recommended, like, hey, you should really log out of social media, you should delete that account, maybe stop doom scrolling on TikTok, those kinds of things. I will say though that there is this counterpoint that I have found where it also really builds community and it helps people really get language for things that are going on with them. I will completely out myself of like, I have 2 kids, one of them was diagnosed with autism, and I was like, oh, I should probably get like checked out because like it's genetic. But on TikTok, like I would see all these autistic like TikToks and I was like, you don't have to come so hard for me. And I did eventually get diagnosed, but it really helped me give a lot of language or like behaviors that I consider myself to be really abnormal. Like I don't drink plain water. And there's this like, are you the neurodivergent that only drinks water or doesn't drink any? And I'm like, fuck you. I'm sorry. So that's kind of my opinion. It's like it can be really helpful in certain ways and really harmful in others. And so I think you have to go into it really being informed consumers regardless of your age about what is going on, and that anyone on the internet can say anything that they want. That's not necessarily true. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
Maybe let the TikToker talk.
I know, right?
Goodness gracious. No, so I'll say, from my perspective, and again, this is just my perspective, I really think that TikTok has done a great job when it comes to mental health of helping people see, and again, I'm just gonna, talk about, like, as I talk about it, that a lot of the mental health problems that people have, they think a lot of it is like internal within them. But being on TikTok and seeing that community and seeing that, well, my mom did this, or my dad, or I experienced this, or I experienced that, and having those conversations, I think it has been helpful. One thing I have seen that I think is really interesting is kind of like how in the media where, like, let's say there's a conversation about a specific diagnosis and stuff. I love how the media kind of has it, not the media, I don't mean it in a conspiratorial way. What I mean is like they'll say things like how TikTok is ruining mental health, or how TikTok, and it's like, no, like there's some other things going on with that. TikTok is making it easier for people to have access to information, but I don't think social media itself is the problem. I think it's the environment that makes social media.
I'm a member of barely, I think 5 or 6 different therapist groups, and I feel like I always see in there is like, these self-diagnosed TikTokers, and I'm like, have you guys even looked at TikTok and like seen it? Have you actually like looked at the information on there? Because yes, there's some incorrect stuff and there's some very correct stuff. I also was self-diagnosed via TikTok and started being like, oh no, this is interesting, and talked to a coworker and was like, who would you recommend I go see about like maybe ADHD? And we found out that apparently I had had it my entire life, like you would, but like my parents never told me, and like I had no idea, and everything suddenly made sense. And so I think I see like my own experience, but I also more recently with youth have worked with eating disorder youth. And I know social media gets a very bad rap, especially with eating disorders. And the TikTok eating disorder community is actually a very recovery-minded one, is what I have found through working with the youth who are finding people talking about what residential treatment is actually like, and like how hard it is to eat on this day or do that. And they're finding a support network that you only really find, like within other people that only really get it if you've been through that treatment.
You guys are the only ones who haven't spoken. Why are you looking at me?
Well, so I guess my 2 cents is it's sort of like any kind of media, right? You consume and you take the bits that make sense, and you also should be doing your own research and following up with professionals. I myself, like just with physical health, for instance, I go on WebMD and I'll Google something and be like, go to the doctor, hey, I think I've got this. Like, no, you don't have that. We can talk ourselves into a lot of things too. So I think like consulting with professionals based on what you're hearing, and if you have the inkling that you might have ADHD or some other type of mental illness, yeah, following up with that, taking that information that you get and then following up with a professional, I think is the next big thing.
I will just interject though, especially when we're talking about like neurodivergencies like
Yeah.
ADHD or autism. If you are not a cis white male, getting diagnoses around that realm are much more difficult because people who are outside of like where all the research has been done don't necessarily meet the same criteria. And I know there's a lot of groups I'm in where they're like, I went and they said I could be autistic because, you know, I'm social. I don't have ADHD because I did really well in school. And it's one of the things where with clients I work with, I recommend like neuropsychs for those types of things, if they can afford them. If not, I tell them all the time self-diagnosis is valid, but full neuropsychs to rule out things. And then I also will often recommend like, hey, do some research on how people who meet your demographic present with these features so that you have common language going in and are able to describe what your experience is like in a way that can help the professional understand. So.
I'm trying not to be the situational therapist. It's coming out, like, and then Black and brown and indigenous people of color don't even have that option. We don't even have the opportunity to get these diagnoses. We can't even, So emotional regulation is a skill. You take in a few deep breaths so that you don't become that meme and comic. It's frustrating because I hear the and I mean no disrespect, but like, man, I would love to have been able to, whenever I was growing up, they called it being gifted. Now I think they just say autistic. I think now that's the language that we use. And it's like the same behaviors that people in the dominant community present with and go to a therapist and see, we will be diagnosed with oppositional defiant. We'll be so yes, the diagnosis is great. We need to start having a conversation about what the diagnosis does, which is affords you access to resources so you don't end up in situations.
But no, I agree. That's why I say also, if you can, that's why I did say that, and that self-diagnosis is valid. So
it is valid, but like I feel like if I were to get on mine, for example, and say, hey, I feel like I want to self-diagnose as autistic, I feel like it wouldn't be welcomed with the same like kind of community that like, you know, someone else from a more privileged community could go on and say like it's actively hostile against us for self-diagnosing. You know?
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. That's again, if you're not cis white male. Anyway, I think we could go on this tangent for a really long time.
I didn't see whose hand was first, did you?
Okay, well, default.
Okay.
As a follow-on to this, as a parent, or how can parents of teenagers who are falling down what could seem to be like social media rabbit holes, how can we support them?
Question.
I don't want to be the person that jumps at everything, but you know,
That's like, I'm always
I'm
finding
a
myself.
family
Yeah,
therapist,
yeah.
you know, and so I think, and again, I think it starts with making sure that we provide an environment that is conducive to teenagers feeling comfortable talking about things that they otherwise would go on the internet and look for answers to. Wow, that was very democratic of me. Because I think them going down those rabbit holes is a symptom, and it's not your fault. We live in a world that is imbalanced and dysfunctional. So there's lots of ways for them to get there. But I think making sure that your home is as for to come and say, Mom, look at what I found on the internet. What did you find? You know, and making it to where they can have conversations with you about it. So I think that's really super important. It's just making sure that there will be no punishment for coming to me, telling me what you've learned. Let's talk about it. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's already happening.
Good. Good.
Yeah, I mean, I shudder to think because I will be honest that I joke with my clients. I'm not a typical therapist. I think that's why some of my clients really like me. But we joke all the time about like my doom scrolling habit. And I will actually tell clients like, oh my God, I just saw a TikTok about what we're talking about right now. Like let's, but that being said, also as a parent, I really, really try and just, when my kids find information that might be questionable or, which they find all the time, they come to me with all kinds of wild stuff, and I'm like, no, that didn't happen. But trying to like have those conversations of like not necessarily telling them like you're wrong or that's bad information, but really like, well, let's dig into like why this information is interesting to you and try and logic it out of like, does this seem something that is actually reasonable listenable? And if so, then what do we do with that information? And if not, then we can like enjoy it and recognize that it's for fun, but that it is not real.
There you
And I guess I would just tack onto it, like, don't be afraid to kind of like do your own research and get out there, find the trends yourself too. And so then when your kid comes to you, you know, you're not shocked, or you actually have something to say about, you know, what they might bring to you too.
I know you had a question.
Two, one technical, one content. One, is there an audience microphone that we can use?
go. I don't know. They usually have one out. If
I don't
you
think
do.
there is though. I don't see one.
Shorts.
Maybe if you can repeat the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent
suggestion.
No.
Alright.
We don't like feedback, I'm kidding. That's an awesome suggestion,
What a
I really
great
like that.
feature, what a
Yes.
great
Alright.
suggestion.
Okay.
Right, and what's your second question?
What was
The
your second?
second one is,
Oh, we have a microphone.
yeah.
Oh, we do have a
Oh.
microphone, hey. Oh, good.
Okay.
You bring it to me, like I'm a social worker.
you're in charge,
You see.
So we just let her think that.
Okay, wait, I turned it on, it says on.
How many therapists does it take
At least 5.
I didn't
to
wanna
work a
touch that too
microphone?
close to a
I know, that
mic.
was my thing, I'm like, I don't know.
Feedback. Alright.
Look at that.
Thank you greatly.
Woo.
My other question is, why are there so few therapists on page, on screen, in places where we are consuming our media, despite the fact that we have so many people who feel like they might need one, or would like to have one?
I might be able to answer that. I think a lot of therapists are introverts, and finding an extroverted therapist is kind of rare. So I think like therapists, like obviously we are the exception. We're putting ourselves out there, but a lot of therapists don't like tend to want to put their private lives out into the world, and kind of are some private people. I think that contributes a lot to it, is like the person who tends to be a therapist is like a helper, and values that like one-on-one interaction, but maybe not so necessarily so much a group.
Could maybe I say,
Go for it.
like,
No, you're right, no, kidding, sorry.
so that's a really good question, because I put myself out there really a lot too. And a lot of the reason we don't do it is, I mean no harm, but like therapists, and a lot of it has to do with privilege, but the idea of a therapist it's been defined in one very specific way. There are a lot of therapists out there that are extroverts. They are BIPOC folks that come from cultures where this type of expression, what I'm doing, is seen as a symptom. This is ADHD, this person is bipolar. So you're not allowed to see the types of therapists that could be, because we are defined out of existence by the diagnoses. So I think you would see a lot more people out there like that, but every single day I have to deal with attacks. So this person is a schizophrenic therapist, he's having a good day and a bad day. Like, there's language out there because I'm not. Hi, my name is Derek Jamal Ford, and today we're going to discuss the intricacies of internal family, and so I think that's some of it's fear. There's a lot of fear around being too much of something, being labeled as that, and then you don't have a profession anymore. Why would I take that kind of therapist, seriously?
I mean, I know why. I do it here because I feel like I've been to conventions since I was like 17, and I'm old as shit now, and so I'm like, this is like my space and my people when they come, and so I feel a lot more comfortable. Plus I consume a lot of pop culture, plus I work in mental health, so like this feels like a very safe space for me. I think when I think of like putting myself out there, in my experience, and this is probably the autism, people don't really like me. They don't know how to take me. I hurt a lot of feelings unintentionally. And so the thought of like putting myself out there into the void and asking people to like please give me grace and like me is something that I don't have the confidence to. Like I said, I can do it here because like it's fine. And plus like I'll never see you guys again. You guys don't really interact with me afterwards. Like I don't think I've ever gotten an email afterwards and been like, your panel sucked. I never got one that your panel was awesome either, to be fair, but like this is a very like finite interaction for me. And again, that also feels safe because if it does suck, I never have to hear about it again. Or like if I'm the panelist that like you guys are like, that was the worst one, how could she be in charge? I don't have to hear that. So like those spaces for me, I have a TikTok. I think I have like 4 videos, and one of them was a joke about like TikToker I follow in my audience. So it was my head. He was not tagged.
I did find it, I just never told you about it.
We met on like we messaged, like you click my name and my videos come up. I mean, it's yeah. Did you see the one about me ruining someone's Amazon reviews?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I also use TikTok to help ruin Amazon reviews of someone's. It was worth it. That's a whole other tangent that I could go on. But I think that for me, like I know that's why that I don't do it, is because of those experiences.
I would say other professional ramifications as well, because like some companies that therapists work for have like no social media clauses, or will find your social media and call it into question. And then there are some vindictive, wild therapists out there that will call you unethical because you're out there talking to people or being yourself and being transparent, and it can ruin your career. So there's a huge aspect of that as well.
Yeah, actually, my boss sent me my first TikTok. Like, right after I posted it, it came up on her For You page, and she sent it to me. Which is fine, we exchange TikToks all the time, and I was like,
Just reminding you you're out there.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like,
Yeah.
I got 4 letters from my licensing board.
see, that's my, we talked
Cool.
about that already, that's my nightmare.
Yeah. I mean,
So what they're also talking about is there's like ethical concerns with the licensing board trying to like make sure that you're presenting as professional out in the world.
and I think that professionalism is rooted in white supremacy. Like, it really is. Don't have, it's okay, I mean, but it really is. It's to keep people from expressing themselves in a way. And like, I wish they would take away my First Amendment rights to say what I want to say. Like, I feel like as long as I'm not coming on there and saying, my name is Derek, I'm a therapist, stop taking your medicine. Like, I'm not doing that. You know?
Please don't stop taking your medicine.
Continue.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But those are like a wide breadth of reasons, like personal as well as professional, and like career reasons.
Well, and I also think about, like, when you think about therapists who show up in, like, media, like movies and comics and things like that, like, or, I don't know what that was. Hopefully it's fine. But I think about, like, I also, like, I'm fighting against some pretty big stereotypes, especially, like, social worker. Like, when you think of social worker, if CPS is not the first thing that comes to your mind, I'm impressed, right? And so when I graduated with my master's degree, there were a lot of jokes about us being baby stealers. And so I think that's another reason too, is like it's an uphill battle, and I just don't have the strength to like go out there and be like, no, like I'm someone different than what you see in media. And also, like, I've said this like every panel, and again, if there's like little in here, I'm sorry, but I really hate the trope that your therapist wants to sleep with you and that. And like, again, I have had clients who have been attracted to me, and you just like, I don't want to put myself out there too, because it's like, I don't want to be perceived. I'm sure some of you get that, right? Like, I don't want to be perceived, and it gets really complex, I think, when you think about all these reasons. And then there's also people who have none of those concerns, who get on TikTok and spread really awful, horrible, incorrect information. I think about, I don't know if you guys know this, but there was a woman who was like, when your client trauma dumps on the first session, it's not trauma dumping, it's therapy. Like,
Yeah, they're supposed to do that. They're there to do that.
I just, for a whole host of reasons, I just have like no energy and no like bandwidth to like fight against those stereotypes. And I do my work in ways of like working with individuals and showing them that a therapist can be different than what they expect. I do I won't say a lot of self-disclosure, but enough where people know that like I'm a human, not a robot. You know, and those are the ways in which I interact.
So, I was gonna add on, you know, just the idea of, so what I do, for instance, in outpatient therapy with youth and family, I do a lot of family work. What's your role in the family? How do you all fit in? Working with blended families, adopted children, ADHD, and a lot of it is really, you're teaching skills, you're working kind of one-on-one or with the whole family unit, and putting that on screen and making that exciting for someone else to watch doesn't really work. In the moment, you know, it can get really intense and it's really dramatic between the client and the family and you can have tense moments, but just popping in and watching it from the outside, you'd be like, what is this? Why am I watching this? You know, you have no connection. It's really, I think it's just hard to kind of make something compelling with some of the day-to-day life of what a therapist does, in my case, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I know you have some.
Yeah, and I'm just trying, because you know, this is what it is. I have a really hard time, like, having a different opinion than someone else because I'm so concerned that I'm gonna say something in the wrong way and offend them. So before I begin, yes, I am responding to what you just said, but I am not trying to be offensive. And I do think that, again, there are multiple ways of doing therapy.
Right.
My therapy and I also do I do stand-up comedy on the side. So a lot of my therapy sessions look very humorous. I think there are parts of therapy that are unique and dependent on the practitioner. And then I think there are parts of therapy like the setup, the greeting, what problem are we discussing today? Okay, I feel like there are things that could be made to be into something entertaining. I would never watch a show like that. Like those sorts of conversations that is so private, that is so what goes on in families. I just feel like let's make we can do a funny thing, maybe have, I don't know, cartoon characters and their family stuff, and we can do things that way. But I just don't think anyone, you know, to wrap around to your point, I don't think anyone should watch that. Like it's personal.
I agree with that too.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I know that I guess moral of the story is there's a lot of reasons why we don't, and a lot of what we do is boring, and it's hard to make some of it interesting, and some people are really good at that, and then there's the rest of us.
Oh, come on.
I see a hand back there. You like?
It is now.
I was wondering, so a lot of what we see in media is like the diagnosis itself, or like the implication of a diagnosis, but we don't see a lot of the other stuff like self-advocacy, like particularly in school, like having to like go up to every single one of your teachers and be like, this is exactly what I need, and if you're not going to give it to me, I'm going to yell at you, like that kind of thing. I feel like that's not seen in media a lot, and I was just wondering what your opinions on that would be.
I was gonna say, I don't know if I see that, I agree, I would tend to agree, I don't know if I see that portrayed very well in media, most of the time, and well, part of the reason is what makes good TV is poor communication.
There would be no sitcoms if people
Because
didn't.
there wouldn't be the conflict unless there's, there wouldn't be tension if there's no conflict. And a lot of the times, you see on TV is the conflict happening. If you had all of your characters going to each teacher and saying, this is what I need from you, teacher, and this teacher saying, oh yes, that is reasonable and I will provide that for you, that's not good TV. So that'd be kind of, I think that's part of the reason.
I think that, I think there's two parts to this. I think there are some people's situations in advocating for themselves that would make good TV. But I think if we just want to have fun with it, for me, I've been to schools for my clients. I don't play with that. Once I write the letter, I did not spend all that time writing this letter for you not to listen to it. And if I went up there in angel wings and a sword, I think that they might pay a little bit more attention. But I do think that, the self-advocacy, that part is super important. And it would be nice to see people giving you a script for how you have this conversation, repeating things over and over and over again, reminding them of what the law is. And the biggest thing is not feeling guilty about it. You have this right guaranteed, go get it. I know clients now where half the battle is just convincing them, let me write a letter for you. I love writing letters, please let me write one for you. So I think that, it probably would help if we had some media representation of people standing up for themselves.
That is,
Also use your accommodations, because that's a big thing too, is
Yeah.
if you have them, use them. I see a lot of people really afraid to use them.
that is, I gotta say, the thing that makes a therapist therapists feel the most badass is when you're writing an advocacy letter and you're like, yep, this is like on, right? It's all like, cause you have somebody like, you're kind of like lending some of your power to that person in a vulnerable place.
And it's always funny to me how quickly things happen when you have someone else advocating for you, like, as such as a therapist, you know? All of a sudden, I've seen the school be like, it's taken this parent months to get anywhere, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we're gonna have a meeting within, 30 days, it's gonna happen.
These professionals said they needed it.
Right.
And I would say even now that I'm working with insurance, same with insurance. Like if you know what your rights are and you know what to ask for, and you have someone like a doctor, therapist being like, hey, this is what my client needs, this is their rights, this is what your policy actually says, like things start moving real fast. And so I think part of that also is that someone has to have the want, or let's be real, it's media, so there has to be some money in, someone wants to put money into openly showing like these are all the things you have a right to do, you have a right to, and this is how you do it, and this is how people who can help you do it. And I think there's not even enough to get that out like visibly. Like you see it here and there a little bit, but most of the stuff I see is on social media. Like these are your rights, these are who can help you get them done.
Yeah, so I have a slightly different perspective because I have not said, I said I do therapy part-time, I've not said what I do. I might work for one of the largest school districts in the state. Maybe by the city, I don't know. And I guess my thing is too is that I have a really strong belief that like when it comes to supporting students, it shouldn't take advocacy, it should just be done. It should just be done, and I am so sick of hearing staff and teachers say, well, we don't have capacity, and I don't get it, because it's like saying we don't have capacity to treat children like people with human needs. And the fact that it does become this battle, makes literally zero sense to me, and having to like argue with schools about why students need this, and how to keep them safe, and feeling welcome, and it is exhausting. So I also think like we don't see it because I think we don't want to acknowledge that it really shouldn't be needed anyway. And yeah.
Let's see, hand up in front here.
It's not quite on. Sorry.
You
It's
got
just
it.
nice and quiet. Okay, so, try not to make this long-winded. So, thinking of psychology and our understanding of mental health being still like a very young field in the grand scheme of science in general, how do you think that like media in terms of movies and TV shows are doing in representing mental illness? Is it being helpful? Is it being harmful? Thinking of, I'm just like pulling something off the top of my head, like a show like The Good Doctor or Atypical, where we're looking at people on the spectrum in the show, and is this an accurate representation? Is this being helpful? And also looking at where things need to improve in terms of, we're trying to have more representation for mental illness, but we're still not doing it in a very diverse fashion, so, yeah.
The part that I heard, like representation for mental illness, that's what stood out for me. I want more representation for lived experiences that lead to us behaving the ways that we do. That's what I want. Like, I feel like we are so stuck. I mean, I understand. I should have ate a sandwich. We are so, that's another, sometimes it's not anxiety, sometimes you need to eat a sandwich and it's anxiety. But the point is, I really feel like, when they do try to have representation of it, it's like it's a plot point in the movie, or I don't want to talk about it because we'll be here forever. But long story short, I want to see more representation of like lived experiences, so people stop growing up thinking, well, this disorder is my fault, or this is all because of what I did. You know, I really want to see, you know, just more origin stories, I think.
I know that this is something I kind of mentioned at several panels, but one like genre that I think gets it right is Marvel, and I think they do a really good job with like showing well, PTSD experiences, but I think like showing the aftermath of PTSD experiences. And when we were seeing the whole storyline of Snap, we were seeing all of those Avengers handling their feelings and experiences in different ways. Some were running from them, some were addressing them, some were doing support groups, some were trying to preoccupy their time with everything and anything else. And I've kind of been watching some of the more recent ones, and don't want to give any spoilers, but I think they're doing a good job of like showing how some types of trauma can result from the experiences that the characters live in. And I think that does they do that job fairly well, in my opinion. Go for it.
I was gonna say, no one else is talking, so I'm gonna turn my back on. It's my attention. I think it really depends. I think the other like representation I would really like to see that we are not ready for is like, I just know you'll have thoughts about this. The impact of the impact of capitalism on mental health and how we are not addressing that. And I saw on TikTok the other day where this guy was talking about like, what was it? Isn't it? Oh God, now my mind is going blank. This happens sometimes. But how to do about like the living and like how, like, I don't know, it got me thinking, I guess, like how no one in this room asked to be born. No one. Not a single one of us is like, yes, please give birth to me. And we are now in this society, in this global society, right? It's not exclusive to just us, where like we have to now be a cog in the machine, working jobs that often make us miserable, that drag us down, make us feel horrible, where people have a right to scream at us because their burger is too cold or whatever. And I have a lot of conversations with clients about like, is it mental health or is it capitalism that's bringing you down? And mental health, skills for days, not a problem, we can figure that out. But capitalism, like, sucks to suck, I'm sorry, like, I don't know.
Now, as a therapist, you know you're not supposed to be political like that. You're not supposed to have thoughts, or that's not professional of you. Your professionalism is lacking right now. Now, that's why I am. I love saying the stuff they can't say. They can't do anything. What are you gonna do to me at this point? I mean, besides take my license away, but then I would become a life coach. No, I'm just kidding. I become a preacher, obviously.
But I definitely hear what you're saying is like, sometimes we have to speak to the system that the client is growing up in, and it's all like, yeah, there's like, and sometimes it's really helpful to somebody to really address like, hey, so there's these other things, but also the system that you're growing up in is holding you down in this way and this way and this way, and we can't quite, like, there's some things we can address, but we can't change that, like, capitalism exists, so, like, how do we?
I mean, we can.
We can. I got some ideas.
Yeah,
I really do.
I'm sorry.
I mean, in that therapy session, we're not gonna dismantle capitalism in this 1 hour session, so.
It's more like 50 minutes, but it's fine. You gotta have some time for notes.
Yeah.
What notes? Never mind, just kidding.
Do we not let
I'm sorry. We do all our notes on time.
On time, whatever.
Every single
Yeah.
session.
And they're accurate.
You can understand them.
Yes. You guys are all gonna be like, therapists need more help than we do, and you are right, 100%.
Why would anyone willingly pick this profession?
because if I help others, I don't have to help
look at
myself.
They're gonna kick us out.
They're gonna be like, never again.
There are a few more hands left.
Yeah.
Alright.
Let's do the left first. Let's do the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think the person in the back has a
Oh,
hand
yeah,
up before.
that's true.
Okay.
So we're gonna
We're gonna
move
do a
backwards. Hand it down.
Thank you. Okay, good. So I was curious about, from a creative perspective, people telling stories about, like, inspired by their own mental health, whether figuratively or literally, that can include things like, for example, stopping taking medication giving you superpowers. How can creatives approach that kind of storytelling with both being true to the narrative that they want to tell and some level of responsibility to readers, viewers, etc.?
That's a good one.
Oh, look at that, we're on now.
Look at that! Oh boy! Time to go.
Yeah.
I think because there are things like that, kind of like Legion or Umbrella Academy. It's all like, but this, like, I think as part of the story, the medication wasn't being used appropriately. But yeah, there still is that message of, like, stop taking your medication and you can reach your full potential, which for many people that's not the case. And I feel like there are a lot of stories out there that kind of a plot point is an adult or somebody responsible is misusing medication for a minor, and then it is, making them like sluggish or not themselves, which, I mean, does happen, but it's kind of like, that's a tricky thing, because like that definitely doesn't happen for most people, and for many people medication is necessary. Just like if you can't make your own dopamine, it's okay to buy from the store.
Yeah, I mean, I know you have something.
I have a billion things. No, I don't want to go over here. This is a group effort.
I think like the story I think of, and if there's only been one person who's ever been to our panel, so like he will know that I'll be like, yeah, you said this last time. The one story or like media that I love that I think gets mental health really right, and it's funny, is My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And I love that story, because it's satire. People who tend to not like it have a lot of complaints about the way that mental health is portrayed, and it's like, okay, well, you clearly don't understand satire. And I think, and not always, I'm not gonna say like everyone has to like it, but a lot of the complaints are people who just don't get like the nuances of it. And I think like that's a really good storytelling that pulled from a lot of experiences. Like a lot of the cast had mental health like diagnoses coming in, had experiences with it, and ended up telling this really like great, funny story with musical numbers, and I'm like super into that. And so I think of like, it's possible. I'm not a writer, so I probably wouldn't be able to give advice, but I would look at media like that does a really good job of telling this very authentic story where you are connected to the characters, where things don't always go right, where medication is misused, and they also go through almost the entire series not having the right diagnosis. And so those are the kind of things that I would think of to like kind of consume to get more ideas.
I did good. I took notes. I did. No, I think that we wouldn't have this problem if medication was placed in the proper context of therapy. It's not. People think that medication is solving the problem, and it's not. It will help bring down the flu. It's not going to get down the fever. It's not going to get rid of the flu. So I think, number one, creators need to think about what is the message that you're sending about medication in your media? What is the message that you're getting across? And then I think, that's really the main thing. Like, there is a lot of nuance to this conversation, and this gets to a very I'll just say it like this, Tom Cruise-y layer at some point, you know? And the people that get it, get it. So there's lots of nuanced conversation about medication. There are some situations, for example, in BIPOC communities, whenever their children have problems in school, often a way for them to be able to get back into school is to get their children on medication to show that they're in treatment. That's forced medication. That's not cool, you know? Like, they don't have the option not to. It happens a lot in the South. I'm from Louisiana, so it's much worse there. So I just think keeping in mind the message that you're sending about it, and I just make sure to tell my clients, like, I did not go to school for 8 years to learn how to, you know, wait for your medicine to work. Like, there's conversations that we're gonna have in therapy. So I think, but it's a really tricky line to walk, because yeah, there's places where it's misused and there's places where people need to feel okay taking it too.
I know. Oh,
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that the places I've been seeing like better representation of that have actually, myself, more recently been some fan fiction I've been reading, that have dove into like the trauma aspects of like I think of one like after the 10th Doctor regenerated and like left Donna, and like she had like trauma and like dove into like how she recovered from that. And there was a really good one I read a couple weeks ago about Remus Lupin, and like how like his trauma and stuff like that, and like medication and using that, and how he'd go off it and then have to go back on because he couldn't do it without it. He needed more support. And so I mean those are just two, but I'm sure there's a lot more than that, because I have like a whole rec list that I'm working on reading through mental health fan fiction stuff. So there is some great fan fiction representation, even if those writers haven't made it to TV and more broad other places yet. One day they will, hopefully.
Alright, I know you had a question.
Okay, so,
Yeah, everyone's turning it off and then back. I feel like I'm in the IT crowd, like, I'm trying to turn it off and back on.
So I'll start by acknowledging that representation of disability is also sorely lacking. But as someone who just went through a job search and at the end of every application had to decide about whether or not my mental health condition really was a disability, even though it was listed there as one of the disabilities, and realizing that comes from, like, is mental health represented as a disability? And I guess my question to you all is, like, would you like to see it represented more as a disability? And, or not? Like, I'm genuinely curious because it's a question I struggle with.
How would you define represented more as a disability? What would that look like for you to see that? How would you know that it has been represented in that way more? What would be an example of some things you'd say?
So when I think about disability as there's something about society that is disabling you from being able to fully participate, and like the ways that a mental health condition can keep you from participating, or that you may not be able to bring yourself, or like.
Oh yeah, whenever you're not feeling great all the time, like when you're not gonna be able to be at work and be 100%, or when I'm not like, yeah, everything's great and wonderful, I love you, things, yeah.
When anxiety gives you
Yeah.
insomnia and
Yeah.
you're jittery by 9 a.m.
And you
have
just
to
can't
work
get it.
for another 8 hours.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to see that. I mean, I struggle. I mean, sometimes on my platform, I have made videos where I'm like, I'm out for 3 weeks, like I'm done, I love y'all, but like you are not the most important thing in my life, you know? And so like, I mean, I love the people that do it, but if you understand, then I can say that and you won't be offended. That's what you mean by like not offending people sometimes, like when you say things and people get offended. But I really think that it would be nice for people to know that like it's okay to struggle, and like you shouldn't feel embarrassed about putting that on paper that, you know, this is, I struggle with it. I think that's the first step, so.
I will talk about it from an autistic point of view. So I was diagnosed maybe like a year and a couple months ago. And for the past couple years, I've actually been work from home due to a different health condition where I've been considered immunocompromised, blah, blah, blah. That is thankfully really weird. Like I'm no longer considered immunocompromised, which is good news. But that meant I had to go back into, oh, no, yes. Don't get cancer, it just sticks with you, like, anyway, and so I was they wanted to force me to go back into the office, which I did not want to do, for a lot of reasons, especially not without accommodations, because knowing that I was autistic, working from home for 2 years, first of all, my productivity went way up, and I didn't have to interact with a big group of people where I was making a lot of social faux pas because I did not understand what was going on. And so I ended up reaching out to my doctor, who said, no, I'm not writing accommodations for you. So then I wrote to my psychologist, who I hadn't seen since my diagnosis, and said, yeah, I just want like accommodations, like I want to sit next to a window, and she was like, well, what can't you do from home? And I was like, there's some meetings, sometimes I have to go into schools, I obviously can't do that from home, and I have to answer this phone line for 4 hours once a week, I can't do that from home anymore. And she's like, okay, so you're just gonna work from home the rest of the time, I'm gonna write you an accommodation letter now. And, which was terrifying, first of all, because now I've outed myself to not just my boss, but my boss's boss, HR knows, and now I don't necessarily have to out myself to my coworkers, but it's gonna be really weird that we're gonna go on year 3, and they're still not really gonna see me because I'm not gonna be in the office. And I think, like, yes, these things are disabilities. Like, me being autistic 100% impacts my ability to interact with the world. If you see me walking around the convention floor and I'm not with somebody, guarantee I'm gonna have earbuds in because I cannot interact with the world around me, right? I would rather just listen to music. I see TikToks. Again, see, I'm so addicted, someone needs to take it away from me. But talking about, like, how, like, me thinking I'm having a good time and I'm smiling and what other people see, like, that is the epitome of me. Like, I look like I'm not having fun. So yes, these things, anxiety too, depression. I have clients who can't get out of bed. These are legitimate disabilities. I think it's hard to admit that because also, like, when you tell people that you're autistic, they treat you like a child. I actually have a really good friend from college, and I said, hey, like, I just got diagnosed with autism, and he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, yeah, like, here's all the ways I'm autistic, and then he literally said, I thought we fixed that for you in college. And, yeah, we haven't talked since. He quickly hung up the phone call. So I really wish that there were more representation, that people can be autistic and live whole lives, that people can have anxiety and live whole lives, but also like those bad days where you can't get out of bed, and that needs to be respected by employers. And I know, again, capitalism, it is not, but I do think those things are important because I think I would feel a lot more confident. Like, my coworkers, like, I tell rooms full of people I don't know that I have autism, and I can't tell my coworkers I've worked with for 4 years. And that's because, like, again, I don't think you guys are gonna track me down and message me afterwards and say anything about it. He's like, no. I think I don't like me either, it's fine. But if I had representation showing me that it was okay to have accommodations, that it was okay to be autistic, that it was okay for me to, like, really struggle showering some days, I think I would feel a lot differently about sharing my diagnosis with people closer to me. So, I don't know. If anyone wants to add anything to that? That was really long, I'm sorry, I rambled too.
No, that was good. Again, just kind of thinking of it from experiences I've had in the last few years with COVID. We weren't able to do any kind of telehealth or virtual kind of work until COVID happened, and being able to connect with some clients and people who have severe anxiety, they do so much better. Like, it's like all of a sudden you take that whole aspect, all of the things that are making them anxious, and you put a support there, and all of a sudden it's like this teenager I've been struggling with for a year, trying to get engagement, and they're not showing up. All of a sudden every single appointment they're there, and they talk for the entire hour, and they want to learn strategies, and they want to get accommodations for themselves. People want to do well, they'll do well if they can. Just going back to how it's represented, I think, normalizing that our society doesn't really promote that. It's kind of that pull yourself up by the bootstraps, hey, you're depressed, suck it up, because I need you to do something for me. And I think, yeah, just kind of normalizing that that's the way it is, and we don't all fit into that box, I think is great.
We only have 7 minutes left, so I don't wanna necessarily cut off any panelists, but I know there was a question over
Yeah,
here.
there was someone.
And there's several,
I think there was
we'll
one
hang, we'll
together.
loiter, so if we don't get to your question, you can like bombard us after the panel. I can't say, I cannot.
I'm about to say, don't you dare set boundaries for me. But no, you can't, it's fine.
I'll hang out and they'll abandon me and then I'll cry, it'll be fine.
Scared. Alright, go for it.
Okay, can you guys this working? I had two questions, but I'll go with one. I've started to notice, well, I haven't started, but I've been reading more and been more aware of how gender roles, one and two, like the typical, stereotypical gender roles are so prevalent in every media you watch, such as like every man is supposed to suck it up, hide all his feelings, and be a badass, or every woman is either, you know what I mean, to some, if she's a strong female lead, then she does the same thing, she hides everything and she fights and she goes on when she's hurting. But how do we as a society or people fight that in our own head so that, you know what I mean, like there's no depressed superhero, you know what I mean, if you do find one, it's very, you know what I mean, niche. There's no Marvel superhero who doesn't get out of bed some days, you know, but how do we still portray that despite the fact that you are this way, you are still like your own hero in your story, and how do we, one, like, advocate that for ourselves, like for other people, and kind of fight that? I don't know if that makes sense.
You had some really good thoughts on Thor in that point of view, right?
Yeah,
I feel like that really
I'm like, it's been a while since I've seen
fits
that
in.
movie, but, I think that, and I can't remember which movie that was that, it was when he like got the beer belly and, he really was showing that he was depressed. And he like wasn't engaging and like had walked away from the superhero life, and like, even when he like started to get back into it, he like didn't magically change everything. I also think about Jessica Jones, and I refer probably more to the comic than I do the Netflix series, because I was a 13-year-old reading this comic, way too young to read that comic now. But like when it came out, and I was like, she's like drinking and she's like angry and she's like having like flashbacks, and oh my gosh, this is what's happening in my life. And she just lays in bed and sleeps some days, and she's like barely goes into her work, and like that's what I was dealing with in school. But she's still a superhero, she still rocks, she's still done really amazing things. And I know there's other examples, like, I'll bring up Doctor Who again, sorry. But like, I think about Doctor Who, and like, I think about moments where like the doctors cried, you know, and he's been upset and depressed, and like, after the 10th Doctor, after everything went down with Donna, he was like, I'm gonna do what I wanna do, and like, look at how that stuff ended up, and like, he was really dealing with emotions, even if it wasn't this like, this is what he's going through, this is what he's feeling, you can tell he's depressed, you can tell he's angry, you can tell he's in grief, which I think they need to name that more too, in media, and I think there are good examples out there that are super far between. So I think gravitating yourself towards those examples, they're old now, but my Jessica Jones comics, when I go through like certain trauma anniversaries, they get reread. And I have my comfort shows that like show those depressed, like, you know, certain seasons where I'm like, yeah, and like they get rewatched because it reminds me and keeps me going. So like finding those, keeping those, like even certain books that like, like the Wendy Project actually, Nikki got me onto that one. When I'm struggling, I'll be like, okay, yeah, I'm like start reading through it, and it was kind of reminding me that like, you got this, you're a badass, you're a rock star, you can keep this shit going. Like, it's okay to not be okay.
I will say really quick, we've got like 3 minutes, but I also think of like masculinity and the way it's presented in Everything Everywhere All at Once. So if you have not seen that, it is phenomenal. My husband hated it, so it says a lot about him. You know, But I loved it, and I loved this very gentle masculinity, this very vulnerable masculinity. There's a YouTuber that I don't watch a lot of YouTube, obviously, it's the first time I talked about it, right? So, but called the Pop Culture Detective, who talks a lot about like masculinity in films and stuff. So if you don't follow him and you're interested in that, and like he has this whole great like bit about like danger of nostalgia. It talks about a lot of these like very interesting concepts that we see in media, but I think that's also where I think of like kind of subverting the like ideas of masculinity. I think that film does a good job at it.
Well, and since we're mentioning YouTube, I wanna plug, Cinema Therapy, which is a really great channel.
You can watch that.
But yeah, Sarah introduced me to that, but it's a therapist and a filmmaker, and they sit down and they break down, you know, stereotypes, they break down relationships in movies, toxic masculinity. There's a great episode where they talk about Aragorn from Lord of the Rings and how he defies all the conventions of masculinity, but is still masculine. And, you know, there's just, they hit a lot of really fun beats. It's fun to watch pop culture and mental health coming together, so yeah, I thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
Alright, we're gonna get thrown out any second now, because it's like 1:29, but it's been 1:29 for a while. So, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
And like I said, I can't guarantee all of us will stay, but some of us will stay if you wanna ask afterwards, but they'll want us to leave, so we'll probably just like maybe loiter outside, so.